Hello, everybody. Welcome to the NBA Tournament Strategy Show. I'm Bob226, aka Josiah. I'm a coach here at DFS Army. Today's day is Thursday, November 17th, and let's get into. And today, let's look at yesterday's slate, see what we did well, what we liked, what we crushed, and then we'll also look at some things that didn't go as well, and then look into tonight's slate, which, by the way, is insane. It's only a 3-game slate, which is something that I love. I absolutely love smaller slates just because for me personally, it's a little bit easier to dig into just the games. There's less games to dig into, a little bit easier to dig deeper through my research. And then ultimately, it's just more fun for me, at least. All the games also start at 10 p.m., which is wild. 10 p.m. start time. Like, I think there's going to be a lot of people who just like set their lineups at lock and then go to sleep. I think the tilting will be at a minimum tonight, at least in the Discord and things of that sort. Let's talk about yesterday. And I'll start off by saying J-Man, he's a DFS Army member. Congratulations. He won like $9,000 last night. Freaking crushed. And he gave a shout out to my guy Upper Slad, who is also a DFS Army coach, who last night, given some of the injury news, he threw out, hey, you know what? I kind of like Jordan Nora a little bit more. And just that little thing got J-Man on Jordan Nora, who crushed last night. You didn't need Nora for the 100K line. This is the 100K winning lineup last night, but Nora definitely still crushed. SGA, he's been on fire this season. I don't think anyone was surprised to see SGA in the Nuts lineup. That made a ton of sense. Jalen Suggs made a ton of sense as well. Once we saw Zion out, literally the night before, we saw Trey Murphy do just enough to make the Nuts lineup, and then he did enough to make the Nuts lineup and crush last night. For those of you who watch the Pre-Lock show, which is the show that typically starts at 5:30 p.m. Eastern time and it's only for VIP members. VIP members are DFS Army members who, and to become a member, you have to click the link in the description, and you can use promo code BOB for a 10% discount. But by becoming a member, you have access to all of the coaches, the Discord, the cheat sheets, the articles. You get a ton of content. And a ton of really good tools to use as well, and access to a lot of the really great coaches. And so Trey Murphy was talked about on the Pre-Lock show. Unfortunately, I just increased my projection on him. I didn't increase my exposure min, so I didn't get as much Trey Murphy as I would have liked to. What really stopped my night from being great, like it was an okay night, but it could have been a great night if I was lower on Jimmy Butler. I was too high on him. Why did he shoot less than he normally does without Tyler Hero and Bam Adebayo? You know, I'm not going to question it. It just didn't work out. Dwayne, I lowered my exposure to him. He wasn't a core play for me or anything like that, but I still had a little bit too much, probably roughly 20 to 30%, which is too much last night. I did have a lot of Jovic, who was fine. Oddly enough, DeAndre Ayton made the Nuts lineup, and this is a great example of how your entire line doesn't have to be on fire. Having a guy who's a little bit too cheap at 6,100, who has just his raw points were enough. You don't have to always hit all the fire guys. Sometimes those nice fill-in guys are enough. And so that's why I don't like to over-tinker in the domination station, because that's how you get a lineup like this. Anthony Edwards was the sneaky GPP guy. I was not on Anthony Edwards last night. We did on the Pre-Lock show talk about the Timberwolves, but it was very general. I mentioned hey, if you have a take on this team, I think someone on this team is going to have a ceiling game against the Magic. I just didn't have a strong lean. If I had to take a wild guess, gun to my head yesterday, I probably would have said Cat or Gobert. But Edwards and Russell were definitely viable options as well. So Anthony Edwards, those of you who are on him, fantastic play. Tim Hardaway Jr., everyone was on him. Jamal Murray, I was double the field on. that wasn't really a shock. I kind of wanted to do like a little bit of a sim model preview, but I kind of want to save that for VIP Army members but at the same time, this is a weird slate. I don't have a lot of time. So I highly recommend DFS Army members check out the NBA sim model before it's updated for today's slate and just look at last night's slate. None of these guys were surprises. In the sim model, they all had had an increased percentage chance of having ceiling games. And so I just recommend people just kind of like back test the sim model every now and then just to get a good feel for trends. Like for me personally, I'm a trends guy, like trying to find the trends when it comes to the sim model. And I loved like doing that back test today that it was on absolutely all of those guys. Like everything, like you can't just use one tool and only one tool. Like it's not going to be right all the time, but it's super helpful in finding some of these sneaky guys and makes them seem a lot less sneaky and random. All right, let's dig into this slate. Like, let's forget yesterday. It was a good day, but let's try to make this one better. We'll start off with this Spurs against the Sacramento Kings game. We know this. The news is going to be what matters the absolute most here. Keegan Murray was injured last game out against the Nets. Terrence Davis came in for him and was an absolute rock star. Those of you guys who have been playing NBA for a while, you guys know Terrence Davis has these explosive performances every now and then throughout a season is when his shot falls. He's a streaky shooter, and it's something that I'm not trying to chase, long story short. If Keegan Murray's out, Terrence Davis will definitely still be in my player pool. I'm not going to X him out or anything. I'm not going to force exposure to him either. The Spurs are looking relatively healthy on this slate. Trey Jones returned in the last game from an illness, and he didn't look particularly good, but he definitely did. He was at least out there, and he scored like 25.5 DraftKings points, so it didn't hurt you too much. Keldon Johnson, of course, is the guy on this team. And he has been for a while with a 28% usage rate. No one else is really close to that. Jakob Poeltl, of course, has he absolutely has crushed the last few times out. And he's never really popular either. So he's a really sneaky center play. Relatively, the matchup's nothing really special, but still relatively sneaky center play. When you have Domantas Sabonis, who's actually the most talented center on this entire slate. So those are probably the two more interesting center plays for me. Oh, yeah. That Magic game, Bobo was crazy. I had a little bit too much Mo Bamba. That sucked a little bit, but I definitely had some exposure to Bobo too. And so it was like a nice balancing act of yesterday. I was always like, do I have a chance of winning? Do I not? And it was a little bit hard for me to tell. Ended up still being a profitable day, but like I said, nothing too crazy. When it comes to if, like, let's say Keegan Murray's out, I think I would be the most excited to play Malik Monk. I know he disappointed us last time out, but I would still be more than happy to get exposure to Malik Monk on a slate like this. I mean, ultimately, there's no one that I'm going to be strongly against on a 3-game slate. What's going to matter the most to me is ownership. And once we don't have that yet, and again, it's so early. These games won't even start for 10 hours. Like, it doesn't matter yet. But once we get ownership, that's going to really determine what I'm doing on this slate. That's what I care the most about when it comes to 3-gamers. I try to figure out what is everyone else doing and what are the 2 to 3 pivots I can make to be different. And when that works, I win a lot. When it doesn't, move on to the next day. Moving on to the next game, we have the Brooklyn Nets and the Portland Trailblazers. Man, the Nets are a shit show right now. No disrespect, but they are so bad right now. I don't know if you do any research on the Nets at all. Kevin Durant had an article come out yesterday where he basically called his team a piece of shit. He was like, guys, he's like, you see who I'm playing with out there? He's like, I know you guys expect me to win because I'm Kevin Durant, but these guys I'm playing with are trash. Like, it's hard for me to win with these guys. And so he said he's really focusing on leadership and he's having a lot of fun playing basketball. He was like, I wish we were mic'd up so you guys could see how much fun I'm having. And so it's just so weird seeing this Nets team, man. But hey, I'm here for it. I think even the NBA knew that this slate was filled with just awful teams. I mean, the Portland Trail Blazers are actually pretty good right now. But just in general, no one's excited to see any of these games outside of from like a DFS standpoint. And so literally none of these games are on TV tonight, like at least from like a national spread perspective. So it's tough. Yeah, I mean, Durant's the only guy doing anything on this team when it comes to like Steph Curry, Joe Harris, Ben Simmons. A lot of these guys are just Royce O'Neal. They need to get hot to get going. And the hard part is there's so many just kind of like useless guys on this team at this point with Kevin Durant really driving usage on this team that it's tough for any of them to stand out. Right now, they're all healthy as well. I mean, of course, Irving's out. He might come back this weekend, apparently. Nice. Oh, never mind. I thought you said you were on PJ Washington last night. Oh, I do want to give a shout out to my guy, Aaron. He took 4th place in a GPP last night. In the Discord, he's Mr. White Chocolate. He was on the Steph Curry call. Freaking clutch. He was so close to taking first. But congrats to you, man. You did well. And yeah, PJ Washington has been crushing. Like that ceiling has definitely been showing up a bit more often. This is a really weird comparison, and I might get roasted for this a little bit, but I feel like Steph Curry, he's been hitting those ceiling performances a bit more consistently, whereas in the past, I was always fine. Like, okay, Steph Curry might have a night tonight, but they're few and far between, so I'm not too concerned about trying to catch that big game. But now it's happening a bit more consistently, where it's something that is something that you just I might feel like I have to actually get a little bit of exposure here. And PJ Washington is similar in the sense that we're seeing these ceiling performances a bit more consistently, and he's starting to feel a little bit less volatile. We'll see how I actually feel when we have to play the Hornets again, if I'm actually going to play PJ, but we'll love to. We'll see. Which team has the better value bench players? Griddian, we're not going to know that until we get the injury news. Literally, like, we can go back to this game, like with the Kings, if Keegan Murray's out, then they'll have really good bench value. If the Spurs randomly decide to have someone sit, similar story. And you can say this for absolutely every team. And so right now, I'm not really focusing too much on the value bench players because it's the biggest waste of time. Honestly, the value plays are so much better later on in the slate that it's not even worth like really trying to overthink it this early in the slate, just because it will become so much more obvious who we should target for like a value perspective later on in the slate. For me, early on in the day, I try to focus more so on just like stud-ish players, guys who might be a little bit under the radar, who could be worth getting a little bit more exposure to if they're not popular. And so a lot of these things, like I've mentioned, will be primarily focused around ownership for me. But again, I don't over tinker because I still like to trust the DS to a heavy extent as well. But really, the Nets aren't standing out. In particular, like if we're talking about bench value, they are lowest on my list. In general, this Blazers Nets game is the least exciting game on the slate. It has the slowest pace on the slate, and it is really the game that I just want a few pieces from. And I at least as of right now, unless like Damian Lillard or Jerami Grant or Anthony Simmons or Josh Hart or any of those guys end up being just super underowned, I doubt I'm going to get too much exposure to this game. Yusuf Nurkic is questionable. If Nurkic is out, then we're going to get a lot of exciting options, especially when we think about guys like Drew Eubanks. But yeah, also I'm excited to see how the rest of the Nets team responds. Could they respond to KD kind of calling them all bums with a ceiling performance tonight, like the bench or like the others really come out strong, trying to prove themselves, or they come out defeated. I don't know. I know narratives aren't numbers, and sometimes it's not worth looking into it too much, but I do think narratives have impact, especially in basketball. Didi said Sumner all day since they like to get blown out, a bench on the floor. Yeah, I mean, that's I don't know what I'm doing yet today, but that's a good way of thinking about things. Like, hey, like, what if this game's a blowout? Like, maybe I want a few pieces just in case that happens. Just kind of creating narratives or things that I like to do on these smaller slates and larger ones too. All right, moving on. This game, funny enough, though, this Brooklyn and Portland game has the closest spread. These other two games have a little bit wider spread, so something to consider with that. Gridiron said, "Are you using 10% randomness in 3 games or 0 preferred?" For me, I always prefer 0. On occasion, for the pre-lock show, I increased the randomization to like 15% to make the DS run faster. And sometimes I'll forget and leave randomization a little bit higher, but typically I stick around 0. Other sports different, but basketball 0 and 0 uniques. Nice. All right. Last game on the slate, guys. Pistons against the Clippers. A lot of injury news that matters here. Let's turn this off. Paul George is questionable. And that's probably the biggest news on this slate. If Paul George is out, I'm going to be loading up on the Clippers. It will make this slate very easy for me. And I'll pivot on the studs. Honestly, I would love if the slate breaks out that way. It would make the slate much easier for me, and just kind of like the way I like to play DFS. John Wall is a usage monster in general already. But with Paul George out, would love that spot for him even more. Ton of guys we could consider. I don't think we have to go into it right now. We could talk about it more so on the pre-lock show. But yeah, definitely guys like Jackson and Morris would be viable options as well. On a 3-game slate, if this happens, I will have multiple variations of just getting a little bit of exposure to different guys who just aren't going to be owned. I would honestly love to get that news and walk through that on the pre-lock show, because I think there would be a lot of value add there. Just kind of dig into the details from that perspective. Outside of that, the Pistons are okay. Cade Cunningham and Isaiah Stewart will continue to be out for this game. The hard thing about the Pistons is that we've seen their starting lineup change. Saddiq Bey was moved to the bench last game, and then Bagley was in the starting lineup. And so the assumption as of right now is that Bagley will remain the starter and Saddiq Bey will move back to the bench. That is not set in stone. I would prefer to wait for a starting lineup and really make my decisions on the Pistons off of that. Killian Hayes has been hot this year. I'm not going to limit what I'm doing with him. Bojan Bogdanovic is a streaky shooter. I would not be shocked if he goes a little bit under-owned today. Can't wait to see that. If he is, then that's a little bit of a sneaky spot. He's not cheap. He's not priced well or anything like that, and that's why I kind of feel like he might be a little bit under-owned. Ivy, only guy I trust? Yeah, I mean, Ivy's really the only guy you should trust. But the thing about these 3-game slates is we're going to have to play around with some ugly names, man. Some ugly names. Also, Bojan Bogdanovic has had at least 30 DraftKings points in at least 3 straight games. Sometimes I do get a little bit worried about jumping onto someone when they're already hot. Like, I feel like I'm chasing those points. I'm not going to overly limit myself from that perspective. It's a similar story with Jerami Grant on the Trailblazers. He's been playing out of this world. I think he's going to be pretty popular tonight. And so I'm still kind of deciding what I'm going to do there. If that is the case, just because I don't know how long he can keep that up with like Damian Lillard and Anthony Simmons and Josh Hart on this team. I just don't know if he can keep those ceiling performances coming. I'll definitely still have exposure to Jerami Grant no matter what, but I might be under the field on that one. We'll see. All right, guys. But yeah, it's a 3-game slate. I'm going back and forth on what time I should start the pre-lock show on. 5:30 p.m. just feels so early, and I don't know if we're going to have any news. And so the pre-lock show could be a complete waste of time if we start that early and we don't have any news. But if we do have news, then we can go ahead and go through it and we talk through different scenarios and things of that sort. So as of right now, I'll keep the pre-lock show set for 5:30 p.m., hoping we get at least a little bit of news that can help us make some decisions in the domination station. If we don't, I'll put it in the Discord, and we might move it back to later in the night. But outside of that, guys, appreciate you guys for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Look forward to seeing everyone tomorrow on a gigantic slate. Hopefully you guys crush it tonight, and I look forward to seeing everyone later today. Gridiron's thinking like 1 hour before is good. Yeah, I'm leaning towards that too. But we'll see. I need to have some conversations with some people. But outside of that, guys, good luck tonight. Crush it. Look forward to seeing you guys later tonight. Bye.